Hello, I'm Nick with stratcolab.org, where good organizations go to get better. And this is another in the Enhanced Resilience series of what we call the StratCollab 5 to 10, where you give us 5 to 10 minutes and we give you a handful of ways to navigate through challenging times. Today's focus area, looting, yo-yo, and you, is really about dealing with situations when your assets are in peril and no help is in sight, as in the tumultuous times that are befalling us even as we speak. So let's get started, and we'll begin with the yo-yo principle. True story. The yo-yo principle was taught to me by Bobby Sherrill. Bobby was an employee who never left the United States until his first fateful trip to the Middle East. He found himself in Kuwait at a time when Saddam Hussein decided to invade that country. And now a number of his other colleagues and fellow Americans were at his hotel calling the U.S. Embassy and registering surprise and shock that they were just getting a recorded message that said the embassy was closed and was offering no help at all. They were beside themselves. Bobby ruefully somewhat laughed to himself, and then he told the rest, well, y'all don't understand. What they've just told you is that Operation Yo-Yo is now in effect. You're on your own. Good words to remember for other circumstances, because sometime in the life cycle of any crisis, Operation Yo-Yo will be in effect. There will come a time when all you have are the skills, resourcefulness, strength of character, and tools that you bring to the table along with those of your people. So when you know that Operation Yo-Yo is going to be in effect, you can plan for it. And you can have more resources and you can have more mental preparation as well, so that you won't be caught off guard. Now let's talk about something else to help frame your situation. Let's talk about the difference between public safety versus personal security, because they are two very different things, although sometimes we conflate the two. Public safety looks out for life, even the life of offenders, especially the lives of offenders, including those who are out to do you harm, who have damaged your facilities and may be threatening the lives of your people. Personal security is a different animal. It looks more at personal protection and protection of assets associated with the person or the facility or the operation. Public safety answers to political leaders, and as such, public safety is all about optics. It's very concerned about optics, about how it looks, about public perceptions. Public safety is not always as nimble as adversaries, because today's adversaries, today's villains, are highly adaptive. And they have the luxury of things like drones and modern communications, and they can be very quick to hide under things like a legitimate protest, for example, and go on very calculated looting campaigns, strike and be gone before the good guys can ever get there. So public safety seldom recognizes that protection of livelihoods can be very much the same as protection of life. Because when one's livelihood is gone, like a business or a critical operation, one's life diminishes as well and may never be restored. So you can't always depend on public safety to look out for your operation. This means that you have to take some of that responsibility yourself and look for other more creative ways to do something about it. And that's what we'll talk about next. Here's the first, protective friction. Protective friction is the idea of introducing some kind of barrier or obstacle that will keep an adversary from victimizing you. And it doesn't have to be Fort Knox. It doesn't have to be the greatest defense in the world, and it doesn't have to be 100% effective. It just has to be relationally more difficult to get to you than to get to somebody else. Sometimes just a little bit more difficult to get to you than to a neighbor. And you see examples of this in many ways. Sometimes protective friction can be risky because it can involve having people, your own people. If you're a faith-based group, you may have some of your own parishioners voluntarily coming in front of your premises so that nobody can easily run into them and loot them. That could be a high risk maneuver, and it's certainly one you wouldn't want to do unwittingly or without thinking through all the consequences. It could be something like what you see on the picture on the left, which is Korean merchants who were protecting successfully their own shops during the Los Angeles riots. As a friend of mine who was there in a police capacity said, when the looters saw these Koreans with rifles on their rooftops, they decided, I think I'll go attack somewhere else where they have no defenses whatsoever, and the risk is a lot lower. More recently, we saw an even braver, although perhaps less risky in certain ways, but nevertheless extremely brave version of this kind of protective friction introduced by a young woman who was a featherweight in Santa Monica on May 31st. She stood in front of two beefy, menacing looters who were trying actively to break into an REI store in Santa Monica. One of them, the one you see here, is pictured here, is holding a skateboard, and he was turning his skateboard into a battering ram and trying to shove it through the door. And this young woman kept intruding in front of them, talking to them, holding up a sign saying "End all violence." She was a protester, and a legitimate protester, believing in the goals of the protest, but she knew that looting was not one of them. And she kept coming back, even though they swatted her off like a fly. She kept coming back, and they left. Even though she was no physical threat to them, she chased them off. When you have a chance, click on that link. It's inspirational to see how effectively that worked. Protective friction. The other thing you can do is distributing risk. Distributing risk is something as simple on a personal level as just not having all your valuables in one place, all your eggs in one basket. When I go to a bad neighborhood, as perhaps do you, I don't have my credit cards, my identification, and all my money in the same place. I distribute them around different pockets. I hide some of them somewhere. I might have a money belt on. I may have just a little bit of loose small bills that I could easily give away to somebody who accosts me and tries to hold me up. But I'm keeping the big bills, the ID, and the credit cards distributed somewhere else. Think about distributing your risk in terms of your operation too. You don't want to have all your eggs on one basket. Think in terms of backups. Finally, think about avoiding low percentage moves. Nothing is worse than the head in the sands idea that you can somehow mollify an angry mob by pretending to be one of them or on their side. They see through that. They may not be the brightest people in the world, but they are possessed of a certain low animal cunning. And they will find that these kinds of moves don't work. Indeed, if anything, they're like a red flag to a bull and they just attract more negative scrutiny. What they communicate is weakness, and it tells the mob, I might as well attack you because you're not going to put up any kind of fight and you have nothing else to stop me. So avoid those low percentage moves. There you have it, a handful of things you can think about. Items 3 and 4, protective friction, distributing risk, those are things you can actually put into place on some level yourself, and they should leave you better off than you started. So, if you like it and you've learned something useful, give us a thumbs up. Share this to anybody who you think can use it. Feel free to subscribe so you can get more. Return to us a few comments so we can improve the kind of work that we do. And remember, until the next time, resilience is a choice, a way of life. And you can't be much of a warrior if you sit out every battle. Fight on.